Hello, you guys, and welcome to the Journey to CEO Success podcast. I'm Melissa Saunders, the head of marketing here at Rhythm Systems, and we are streaming live on Patrick Thean's LinkedIn account. Hello, Patrick.
Hey,
Happy
Melissa.
Friday.
Good to see you today, Melissa.
Yeah, yes, you too, you too. And hello, LinkedIn world. For people who may be watching live or listening to our podcast and don't know, Patrick is the co author of the Amazon best-selling book, The Journey to CEO Success. He is a well known strategy execution expert, he's a speaker, he's a CEO coach, and he's the creator of the Think, Plan, Do process, which has been used by hundreds of companies, thousands of executives. And this is a growing list. He's the co-founder and CEO of Rhythm Systems. Patrick, I'm sure we're all wondering, I can barely make it to work, get groceries, and take care of my kids. How do you find time to run a business, write books, coach CEOs, lead planning sessions all around the world, and spend quality time with your family? Please tell us.
Well, first, you know that one of our core values is family is a blessing, right? You know that
Yes.
already. So, I just prioritize it, make my kids and my wife number one priority, and I schedule them in first. So, by the way, a long time ago, Pei, my wife asked me. She said, "I can't believe that when we have time with you, we got to schedule it." And
Yeah.
I said, babe, that's kind of how my life is. Like scheduling you in is prioritizing you,
Mm,
is making sure that I have time for you. So yeah,
good point.
I prioritize them and I schedule them in first.
Yeah, no, I think everyone could probably learn to do that a little bit better. In your new book, The Journey to CEO Success, you talk about the seven practices. And for the last several weeks, we've been talking about different chapters for high growth leadership. And, even though it's a business book, what I love about it is the way that you're able to weave in stories about your family and friends. People who don't even know you after reading the book, I think will have a better understanding of who you are as a person and your personality. I love that. So many books you read and they're very sort of, black and white and you don't get a lot of character. In chapter 8, which is what we're talking about today, you tell this really funny story about a drive you did with your wife from Charlotte, North Carolina, all the way to Seattle. First of all, wow, how many miles was that?
That's a lot of miles. A lot of miles, a lot of hours. And the reason why we have Seattle is because I've got two beautiful daughters, and Joy, my older daughter, works in Seattle. She works for Blue Origin in Seattle, and my younger daughter is actually about to go to Seattle to work for Boeing as well. So both of them are going to be in there. However, this trip we're talking about, we had two choices when you take this trip. It's very interesting. The highway leaves, and we're going diagonally across the country, so it's really a long drive. But what's
Definitely.
interesting is that at some point the highway splits. You have two choices. You can take I-90 goes one way, and if you do that, you kind of go through Montana and
Beautiful.
and the other one, I-29 actually takes you I-80 actually takes you to Salt Lake City, Utah. Both routes about 40 hours of driving, and so it's about
Wow.
the same amount of time, almost even the same number of exact miles. So the only real question is which sites would you prefer to see. Now I want you to realize that the why we're doing this to Seattle is my daughter. The what is Seattle. That's the what. This
Sure.
is now really about the how. How are we actually going to get there? And let's just imagine that that I want to go to Glacier National Park, and Pei really wants to go see Utah. But we didn't talk about it, right? Because we're going to Seattle, and we didn't think to talk about it. So we figured out we'll discuss the options along the way. But then, as it happened, right at the junction, I'm asleep, and
Took a
Pei's
nap.
driving, and I'm asleep in the passenger seat. So she takes I-80 towards Salt Lake City, and we didn't discuss this, we didn't get aligned on where we want
Sure.
to go. So she took the route towards Salt Lake City, and I wake up and I realize, wait, what's happened? Oh, we're heading towards Utah on the 80. And she says to me, "That's right." She
Yeah.
said, and I said, "But I thought we are going to take I-90 to Montana." And she said, "Montana, I didn't know that was the preference, but Salt Lake City would be a nice stop, right? And
Yeah.
anyway, this is the shortest route." And I said, "Well, no, it's really not the shortest route. It's about the same. So you just preferred this route." Now, by the time we had this discussion, uh, we had
You
already
like
passed this
further out.
point, like an hour, right? So
Oh,
so if we decide to go back, it'd be losing. First, we would have
that
wasted the
hour.
hour's drive.
Mhm.
We would waste another hour going backwards. So the point is that this is about full alignment, and clearly, Pei and I were aligned on what we're going to do. We're going to drive to Seattle, but we weren't aligned on how we're going to get there. And so, what you should learn from this story is that the disagreement that we were having, or the discussion, was really about the how, not the what. Like, we had already agreed on what. It's really
Mhm.
the how. And at this point in time, because we'd already moved forward on one route, if even if she had agreed, which, by the way, my wife is wonderful, she agreed. She said, "Hey, we can go backwards, fine." But I didn't want to, because that would mean waste and rework. In our world over here, it translates to waste and rework. So my point, though, is that when you don't have alignment on the process and on how you're going to do that, you're probably going to make different choices along the way, and you may not understand or realize that you may be driving each other apart. So in this one funny story, it didn't drive us apart. It's fine. We just went to Salt Lake City. But if we had really wanted to take the other route, we would have wasted an hour driving back, and we would have wasted 2 hours on a very long journey. So the message here is to really talk about the how. It's really the how, the process of achieving what you need to achieve, that gives you full alignment. That's the real thing to learn here.
Excuse me. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess, that can definitely be applied to the business world as well. Can you do that for me a little bit while I get you a drink of
Yeah, first you need some water so
water?
that you can get more comfortable here. Uh, but I would say that you know people get this wrong very easily, because most of us think that once we've decided on what we're going to do, we're aligned. And I'll tell you, most of the sessions I've done in coaching, I've seen people make that mistake. They go, "Oh, we've
Yeah,
agreed on X, Y, Z. We are
yeah.
aligned." And I'm like,
You
"Yeah,
agree on the what?
maybe not totally aligned, because that's the what. But you need to talk about how you're going to get there." So people still usually get that wrong. But here's some signs you can look at, though, that can tell you that it's not quite right yet. One is that a lot of folks are still used to working in a silo. I know people don't like it when I say silo, but think about the silo as your own team, your own department. And if all the work you're being done is on your department, in your department, you're working a silo. So I visited many companies where I'll say, "Hey, let's see if you are aligned horizontally, not just
Mhm,
vertically. Vertically alignment is just aligned to the company's strategy, and that's good too. But horizontal alignment with other teams and other departments is what
mhm.
I'm really referring to in this chapter. So, you're not aligned if you look at the people working on your project and they all work for you. In other words, they're all on your team. So there's
Sure.
no influence coming from other teams, other departments. And I'll tell you that in today's complex world, multifaceted world, most projects really need some cross-functional work. They really need expertise outside of your team that you don't have. And
Definitely.
if you're thinking that I can only run projects that I own the resources, then you're going to move slower. You're going to move slower. You need to learn to think, okay, how do I get horizontally aligned, borrow other resources from other teams with expertise that I don't necessarily have on my team, and that'll make us go faster. So the other thing that happens sometimes is that whether you know it or not, your project affects other team members. And if you forget to ask or get input from other team members or across other teams, you hit these blockages that waste time and causes some rework.
Yeah, well, and especially even if if you do work vertically without checking in horizontally, you could do a ton of work, get all the way to the finish line, and then realize it's not actually the end product isn't what the other teams actually wanted. So that could be really problematic. You're right. And I'm sure this is just one of the mistakes that leaders can make around the
Yeah.
topic of gaining full
I do
alignment.
want
Can
to
you?
share with you a very quick example of what you just
Yeah,
said
please.
from a customer. This customer shared with us that, they had this project that was delayed because one of the departments had to build the product. Okay,
Mm,
which they
okay.
did. After they finished building the product, they handed it over to the marketing team to package it and then to release it to the world.
Sure.
But the marketing team didn't realize that this was work coming down their pipe. Therefore, when the product team actually brought it to the marketing team and said, here's the new product, it actually delayed the product release by 2 quarters because the
Wow.
marketing team already had other work being done. So they really couldn't make the time to package and release. And so, or they could have, but it would have been
Mm,
other commitments that they had already made that they wouldn't be able to do. So in this case, they decided and agreed upon delaying the launch for a couple of quarters. So if you want to think about it, we just wasted a couple of quarters because we forgot to get aligned between the product team and the marketing team. So simple handoff. So this is a good example of a simple handoff. Isn't so simple after all, right?
yeah,
Because
right.
we didn't get fully aligned on whether or not Team B had the capacity to
Yeah.
accept the work and get it down the pipe. So that's a good, unfortunately, a real life example of a company not realizing that they were not fully aligned on
Yeah,
the product.
right.
The product.
I think that is an important point you make, Patrick. It's not only the what that you need to get alignment on, but it could be sort of the timing of the what. So in that case, had marketing known several quarters ahead of time that the what was going to be delivered, I think they probably could have made some changes to the schedule. But
Absolutely, absolutely, and
yeah,
that's what we mean by getting fully aligned.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you tell me about other mistakes that leaders can make and that you've seen in your CEO coaching?
Well, I would tell you that a lot of this is leadership is really is a full contact sport, and sometimes I think if we forget that there's a difference between abdication and delegation, and sometimes leaders
Mm,
say, "Hey, just go get that done, and
sure.
have fun, and when you're done, come back and let me know." And I think sometimes people make the mistake, a very common mistake, of thinking that if I were to check in, I'm now micromanaging you. Well, I think that that's really not micromanaging. You do want to check in so that you can, as a leader, make sure that team A is working on stuff, and when or where do they need to get aligned with other teams. As a leader, you want to help with that because most of us were working hard with tunnel vision. We're focused on our team, and sometimes we forget. It's not intentional. We just forget to go check in with the other teams. But as the leader, you that maybe has a wider perspective, wider view. You want to help people. I think you want to delegate, but you want to bring them back and make sure that they're getting aligned with other teams because it's a very cross-functional world right now. So leadership is really a full context sport. You got to keep your team aligned, check in often so that you can help them get aligned with other teams as well.
Yeah, I like that definition of delegation. It's, I think as employees, we all want to feel like we have the power to do a project, based on you give me sort of the goal and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to get it done. But I think the important part you make in this chapter is saying that delegation is more than just sort of saying do it. We also need to figure out when we're going to set milestones so that we know, what, once a week we're going to come together, we're going to check in.
Yeah.
That's just as important as sort of telling the employee or team sort of the what's needed, the check in.
Yeah, what's interesting is that a lot of people think about providing a status and a check-in more
Yes.
from an accountability perspective, and that's not wrong. That's not wrong at all. I think of it also, there's the other side of it, which is from an alignment perspective. So what I mean by that is, let's say we're working on a project together, and
Okay.
I need your help, by the way, on this project, and I'm having some challenges on it, but I don't let you know. So now you can't really help me. But if I let you know that, hey, this project is red, I have that discussion now, let's say in week 3, you and I can now get realigned. In other words, you're thinking I'm doing fine. I'm thinking I'm not doing fine. By letting
Mhm.
you know that I'm not doing fine, we can make some necessary adjustments so that resources may need to be realigned. You might be able to help me, and you might want to help me in such a way that takes energy from something else, right?
Mm.
So this is what I would call uh, realignment, continuous alignment. So it's not good enough to actually get aligned in the very beginning. Full alignment is, yes, alignment on the beginning with the how, but also alignment on your milestone, so that if you miss a milestone that affects other people, people can make the right adjustments. So like in this, back to this story about my wife and I driving to, when we
Yeah.
when we when we that's right, to Seattle, when we were on the way to Salt Lake City already, I had to make the adjustment, right? I had to choose and say, okay, we'll continue to Salt Lake City, and I'll just readjust my itinerary. In other words, I realigned my itinerary
Mm.
to the turn that she took, and I was fine with that, right? That's really how you should do it versus being mad or pissed off that you're going to go somewhere. But I realigned myself. I said, okay, it's fine. We'll have other opportunities to visit Montana and Glacier National Park. We can go this way and go check out Salt Lake City. So no problem. But what happened there was a realignment for me.
Mhm.
So that's important, that you can get fully aligned, but we're all human. We're going to make mistakes, and when we find out and discover that some things are off, we want to get realigned. So what I've learned is that um, in our business execution world, things can get out of alignment very easily. Very easily. A milestone that got missed, something that I need that didn't get delivered to me. And so, consistent and regular realignment every single week with minor adjustments helps you to stay aligned all the way to your destination.
So weekly adjustment meetings is sort of I think, sort of the key. And you mentioned earlier red. Tell me a little bit more. If I was having problems with
Yeah.
a project, how do I tell the leader or my supervisor I'm having trouble?
So we have a process that talks about setting your success criteria. Green is the goal.
Okay.
Red is unacceptable. It's way outside the boundaries of success. Yellow is in between, and then what we call super green is the stretch goal. And so, what's important to note is that when we set red, yellow, green criteria, what we teach is that that has to be clear and objective. So you don't wake up this morning and go, "Oh my gosh, I feel like my project is red." You shouldn't be
Mm.
saying that. You should be saying, "Oh, I woke up this morning, I checked my numbers, and my project is red because this metric didn't hit the right thing, or this milestone that we were supposed to achieve, we didn't achieve." So it's got to be pretty objective about whether something is green or something is red. It shouldn't be like how I feel. So what we call, how you then discuss that with your team is, okay, unfortunately, the metric is such that this week the project is red. Now I call this the gift of red, because it's actually bad news. If people feel like, oh, I got to give you bad news that something's red, but I really believe that in this instance and in this application, bad news is actually good news, because I
Mm.
so I call this the gift of red. In other words, you need to have enough courage to let me know, or your teammate know, that something's red, not going well. And that's a gift, because if you told that person early enough, you have more time to make the adjustments, get better realigned, and then solve the problem and achieve the goal. But if you waited 2, 3, 4 weeks holding that in your heart, or
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to solve the problem, but ultimately not figuring out how to, not solving the problem, then you just wasted 3, 4 weeks of the team being able to work together to solve the problem. So I call this the gift of red. I think that bad news in this situation is actually good news. So give me the bad news so that early, so that we can work on it, get realigned, and then make ourselves and our team successful.
Patrick, I think I must blame my first grade teacher. When I think about the word red, I kind of cringe up. I think it's all of those
Yeah.
red marks she made while she was trying to teach us writing. But you're saying, you know what? If you raise, it's almost like raising your hand. If you raise your
Yeah.
hand early, your team is able to help you. And the only way they know that you need the help is if you say, "Hey, I'm in the red right now, and I
That's right.
need your help."
That's right. And I would say, you know what, the project is red, or the KPI, key performance indicator,
Hmm.
is red, versus saying that I'm in the red, right? Because I'm not in the red. The project is red. I need help for the project. And I think that depersonalizing it makes it easier to
That's
share
a good
the
point.
tough news. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another mistake you mentioned is not agreeing on the process, and I'm assuming this is the same problem you had with your wife when you experienced in that car ride. Is
Right.
that right?
Right. We just didn't talk about the process, right? We didn't talk through, like, we need to make a decision by this junction. We
Mm-hmm.
knew that we had to make the decision, but we didn't know, we didn't talk about, well, we didn't look at the milestones to say when we have to make that choice. So
Yeah, yeah. So really, I think if I'm getting you right, you need to start with the why. So you communicate your vision. You can delegate. Delegation is great, and you need to agree on the process to get there, as well as check-in points. Is that a
yeah,
good summary?
yeah. And why are we doing this? So that we can stay continuously aligned. That's
Yeah.
really why we're doing it, because I've, the best laid plans of men and mice, right,
Hmm.
get
Amen.
messed up because life happens. So
Definitely.
when life happens, whatever strategy you have, just kind of they get torpedoed, and therefore, to solve that problem, you've got to get realigned.
Hmm.
And this process, it can't. I use the word process because I do believe that for great execution, this should become a process. Where step one, when you create your plans, you get fully aligned, you understand what resources you're using, who can help you, and reach across the lines, get horizontally aligned with other teams, not just vertically aligned with your boss, but horizontally aligned with other teams. And then as you're executing towards your 13-week race towards achieving the quarter, you want to get realigned on every week to make sure that things are still the same, still successful. And therefore, if you now hit a red, the gift of red, you want to have that discussion so that you can make adjustments and then check again to see, when I make these adjustments, who else do I affect?
Hmm.
Which team does this delay affect, so we can get realigned? A lot of times people forget that second part. And so when we get to the destination, or we get to wherever we want, the other team is surprised, saying, "Wait, I didn't expect you to get here at this point in time." And we made that adjustment. Yeah, but you never told me. You never told me. So get fully aligned at the very beginning. And
Yeah.
step two is get continuously realigned. Check your alignment so that throughout the journey, you are aligned with your team as well as the other teams across the company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the real benefits of full alignment is that it's important. These weekly meetings aren't status meetings because you do that ahead of time. You're able to kind of report on your progress on your different priorities and KPIs using the rhythm system ahead of time, so that your meeting time is spent actually figuring out solutions to problems, not just hearing how Bob and Sue are doing on the project. Is that right?
Very much so. You got it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Do you have any other helpful hints for CEOs listening?
Um, you know, we didn't talk about this one thing which I really like. I call them spicy conversations, right?
Yeah.
And I call them spicy conversations because, this comes from eating some of my favorite foods from Singapore. And most of the stuff I love from Singapore, I'm from Singapore, is kind of spicy. And
Uh-huh.
what happens with these foods is you eat them and you start sweating because they're spicy, but they're so delicious. You continue to eat them and you just drink water or whatever. You get rid of the spice and keep going. And by the time you're done, it's like, I'm so delicious, but I'm drenched in sweat. So
Yeah.
that's why I call these spicy conversations, because a spicy conversation is when you kind of have to talk to somebody about something difficult, a tough conversation.
Mhm.
So you start to sweat. You start thinking, "Ooh,
That's true.
I don't really feel like
Oh.
talking to you about that." But what
Mhm.
I've always found is that if you just sweat it out and have that conversation, it's helpful. And after you're done, it was never as bad as we thought it was. Like our brains will imagine the worst possible outcome. But when we have those spicy conversations, as long as it's helpful to the other person, we're helpful. We're helping. It's not
Hmm.
bad. But it's hard to do. It takes intention. It takes courage. So I put some some lightness into it by calling it a spicy conversation. And I
Yeah.
think if you can have those spicy conversations, those are the conversations that help you get aligned as well.
And Patrick, when I first heard spicy conversation, I thought, "Ooh, that sounds a little R-rated." But really, how do you say that? If I need to talk to my significant other or even a coworker and I need something's on my mind, it's weighing heavy on my heart. Do I say I need to have a spicy conversation? How do I do it? Bring a glass of wine? Tell me more.
Well, actually, I don't have any other formula other than it takes courage, and I just sweat,
Yeah.
smile, take a breath, and I just get into it. I found that I don't. I found that look, I'm always doing it for good reasons and good intentions. So there's a
Definitely.
few things that make it good. One is that I'm doing it for you. Like if I'm having a conversation with you, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it with good reasons, good intentions. I'm
Mhm.
always curious. So, the first practice in the new book is about curiosity. So I'm always curious and I'm tentative. So I don't go, hey, Melissa, I can tell you that you screwed up in this area. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, hey, Melissa, I'm curious about this thing that I saw. And by the way, I may have misheard or I may have misread
Mhm.
it, but this is what I'm seeing. So you can see I'm being tentative. I'm not being accusatory. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm also concerned about the other person and I just want to be helpful. So I have good intentions. And by the way, you already know this because you're part of a company. We have a no TDC core value, right? No thinly disguised contempt core value. And thinly disguised contempt is also about avoiding being passive aggressive. And I
Right.
found that the only way to truly have no TDC is to understand that when you don't feel like having a conversation, you need to have that conversation. So you know, it's like I don't really feel like
Great
talking
point.
to Patrick about this.
Yeah.
Oh man, I gotta talk to Patrick about this. So so getting spicy is
Mhm.
the practical way of maintaining our no TDC core value. And if we avoid the spicy, it unfortunately leads to unspoken misunderstandings that can lead to passive aggressiveness and ultimately unhappiness. So I love the spicy conversation. I'll tell you that one time I've been told that in the old days I used to use the word, "Hey, let's have a stress-free conversation." One of my friends in a previous company, I walked up to him. I said, "Hey, Bill, we have a stress-free conversation." And he did this. He kind of did this. I said, Bill, what the hell is that? He said, "Oh, I'm putting my armor on. I'm putting my armor on." I said, "Why are
Poor
you putting your armor on?" He said, "Because your stress-free conversations are so freaking stressful." Um, and we laughed about it. And so what I've realized is you are right. I do have some ticks in my conversation, in my
Mhm.
language, that when you get to know me well, you know. I may come in, I say, "Hey, let's have a stress-free conversation." And
Yeah,
he
right.
asked me that question. I said, Bill, the reason why I call it stress-free conversation is because by having this conversation, we will not have stress later.
That's
I'm
right.
freeing us of future stress. But that's the
Mhm.
same thing as my spicy conversation. Let's have a
Yeah.
spicy conversation and then just go drink some milk and get rid of the spice.
That's great. What a great discussion, man. I love the spicy conversations and the talk about delegations. It's great. I know next Friday we actually won't be doing one of these podcasts because it is Thanksgiving break. So, man, talk about right in time for those spicy conversations with family, huh? So hopefully people are taking notes and will appreciate that. And if they have anything heavy on their chest, they'll go ahead and have that conversation with their old Aunt Bertha. But you can see here we do have a code here. If you go ahead and scan that, people can purchase your book right now on Amazon Kindle for only $8.99, and you could start your journey to CEO success now. And until next time, enjoy your journey. Talk to you guys later. Bye, Patrick.
Thanks, Melissa.